It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a second chance at love after years of loneliness and heartache. Instead, it became the day my son, the boy I raised with every ounce of my being, publicly humiliated me and the man I was about to marry. They mocked him, whispered about his age, and snickered as he walked down the aisle, completely unaware of the bombshell that was about to drop. I stood there, watching the smug grins on their faces, feeling my heart shatter into a million pieces. You tell me, was I wrong for letting them dig their own graves? Was I wrong for allowing the truth to unfold in front of everyone, exposing their cruelty for the entire wedding to see? I honestly don't know if I could have done anything differently, but I've replayed that day 1,000 times in my head, wondering if I should have intervened sooner. Let me take you back to the beginning to understand how we even got to that point. My life hadn't always been easy. I married young, had my son, Michael, and then tragically lost my first husband, his father, in an accident when Michael was just a teenager. It was devastating. I poured all my energy into raising Michael, making sure he had everything he needed, even if it meant I went without. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to put him through college and give him the opportunities his father never had. We were a team, or so I thought. After he graduated, he met Sarah, and they quickly fell in love. Sarah was beautiful, charming, and initially, I thought she was a wonderful addition to our small family. They got married, and soon after, their careers took off. Michael became a successful architect, and Sarah, a marketing executive. They bought a beautiful house, had 2 wonderful children, my grandchildren, and everything seemed perfect on the surface. But slowly, subtly, things started to change. Michael became distant, preoccupied with his new life, his new status. Sarah, while always polite, had a way of making me feel inadequate. Like my simple life, my modest home, wasn't quite up to their standards. I tried not to let it bother me. I loved my son and I adored my grandchildren. I was content with my quiet life, finding joy in gardening, reading, and spending time with my few close friends. Years passed, and I never really considered dating again. My first husband was the love of my life, and the idea of opening my heart to someone new felt like a betrayal. But then, I met Arthur. It was at a community art class, of all places. I had decided to try something new, to get out of my comfort zone, and there he was, sketching a beautiful landscape with such focus and passion. He was older than me, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a gentle demeanor that instantly put me at ease. We started talking, first about art, then about life, and soon, we were spending hours together, just enjoying each other's company. Arthur had a rich history. He was a retired history professor, incredibly intelligent, with a dry wit and a vast knowledge of the world. He had traveled extensively, written several books, and lived a life full of experiences. He was everything I hadn't realized I was missing. He made me laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in years. He listened to me, valued my opinions, and made me feel seen and cherished. He was a true gentleman, with old-school charm and impeccable manners. After a few months, he asked me to marry him, and without a moment's hesitation, I said yes. I was giddy with happiness, feeling like a teenager again. I couldn't wait to tell Michael. I called Michael, bubbling with excitement, expecting him to share in my joy. His reaction, however, was far from what I anticipated. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that felt heavier than usual. Then, a hesitant, "Mom, are you sure about this?" Followed by a string of questions about Arthur's age, his finances, his background. I tried to explain how wonderful Arthur was, how happy he made me, but it felt like my words were falling on deaf ears. He seemed more concerned with logistics and appearances than my happiness. When I finally met with him and Sarah to introduce Arthur, the tension was palpable. Sarah was overtly polite, almost sickeningly so, with a condescending tone that made my blood boil. "Oh, he's charming," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And so distinguished." Michael, on the other hand, was openly skeptical. He grilled Arthur about his retirement, his health, even his family history. Arthur, ever the gentleman, answered patiently and honestly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Michael's barely concealed hostility. The conversation quickly devolved into an interrogation, with Michael repeatedly asking, "But what does he do now, Mom? How does he support himself?" I was mortified. I tried to interject to defend Arthur, but they just brushed me aside. It was clear they had already judged him, decided he wasn't good enough for me, not good enough for their family. The wedding planning became a source of constant stress, largely due to Michael and Sarah's interference. They questioned every decision, from the venue to the guest list, always with a subtle implication that my choices weren't up to par. They pushed for a lavish, expensive wedding, something I couldn't afford and didn't even want. Arthur and I preferred a more intimate, simple ceremony. We just wanted to celebrate our love with the people who cared about us. But Michael and Sarah insisted on inviting their entire social circle, people I barely knew, and demanded we use their preferred vendors, all of whom were incredibly expensive. I tried to stand my ground, but Michael kept saying, "Mom, you deserve the best. Don't you want to make a good impression?" It felt like they were trying to control everything, to turn my wedding into a display of their own social standing. I eventually conceded on some things just to keep the peace, but a part of me resented their intrusion. They even started calling Arthur, the old man, behind his back, a derogatory nickname that stung every time I heard it. I confronted Michael about it, telling him how disrespectful it was. But he just shrugged, saying, "Lighten up, Mom. It's just a joke. He is old." Sarah would just offer a sickly sweet smile and say, "Oh, we're just teasing, dear. He's so fragile, we have to be gentle with him." It was infuriating. They treated him like a doddering old fool, completely oblivious to the incredible man he truly was. As the wedding day approached, their behavior only worsened. They would make snide comments about Arthur's attire, his choice of words, even the way he walked. It was a constant barrage of subtle insults, designed to chip away at my happiness and undermine Arthur's dignity. I tried to shield Arthur from it, to deflect their negativity, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. He never complained, never retaliated, just smiled politely and continued to treat them with kindness, which, ironically, seemed to annoy them even more. They couldn't understand how someone could be so gracious in the face of such blatant disrespect. They assumed it was weakness, a sign of his senility. It broke my heart to see my son, the boy I loved more than anything, treat my future husband with such disdain. I kept hoping something would change, that they would have a moment of clarity, that they would see Arthur for the wonderful man he was. But that day never came. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, about to marry the man who brought so much joy back into my life, surrounded by my closest friends and family, and my own son and his wife were actively trying to ruin it. They were whispering, snickering, making their contempt for Arthur clear to anyone who cared to look. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stopped the wedding? Would you have confronted them right there and then? Or would you have let the chips fall where they may? The ceremony began, and I watched Arthur walk down the aisle, his face alight with love and happiness, completely oblivious to the cruel whispers coming from Michael and Sarah's pew. They were pointing, laughing, covering their mouths to muffle their taunts. My heart ached, but I held my head high, determined not to let them ruin my day. As Arthur reached the altar, a man from the audience, impeccably dressed and radiating an aura of authority, stood up. He approached Arthur, extended his hand and shook it warmly. "Professor Davies, it's an honor," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church. Michael and Sarah exchanged confused glances. They thought this stranger was interrupting the ceremony. The man then turned to the officiant. "With all due respect, Reverend, I believe Professor Davies has an announcement to make before we proceed." The officiant, looking surprised, nodded slowly. Arthur smiled, a knowing glint in his eye, and then addressed the assembled guests. "Thank you all for coming today, to witness this joyous occasion. Before we continue, I feel it's important to introduce someone very special who has joined us." He gestured towards the man who had approached him. "This is Mr. Thompson, my executive assistant, and he has a brief message to share." Mr. Thompson stepped forward, holding a sleek tablet. "Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for the interruption, but Professor Davies requested that I make this announcement at a suitable moment. As many of you know, Professor Davies, a renowned historian and author, has always been a private individual. However, with this new chapter in his life, he felt it was time for a public acknowledgement of his recent endeavors." Michael and Sarah were now looking genuinely bewildered, their smug grins replaced with confused frowns. Mr. Thompson continued, his voice clear and professional. "It is with great pleasure that I announce Professor Arthur Davies has officially finalized the sale of his entire literary catalog and intellectual properties to the prestigious Blackwood Publishing Group for a sum exceeding $250 million. A collective gasp rippled through the church. My jaw dropped. I knew Arthur was successful, but I had no idea about the true extent of his wealth. I looked at Arthur, who just winked at me, a playful smile on his lips. Michael and Sarah's faces, however, were a picture of utter shock, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with disbelief. Mr. Thompson wasn't finished. Furthermore, as part of this acquisition, Professor Davies will be appointed chairman of the Blackwood Philanthropic Foundation, an organization with an endowment of over $1 billion, dedicated to supporting education and arts initiatives globally. This position will be officially announced next week at a press conference in New York City. The silence in the church was deafening, broken only by a faint, choked sound from Sarah. Michael looked like he had seen a ghost, his face pale, his eyes darting between Arthur and Mr. Thompson. The old man they had mocked and ridiculed was not just wealthy, He was a titan of intellect and philanthropy, someone of immense influence and respect. The man they had sneered at was now the chairman of a billion-dollar foundation. The irony was palpable. Arthur then stepped forward, his voice calm and clear, but with an underlying steel I hadn't heard before. "I believe that covers everything, Mr. Thompson. Thank you." He then turned directly to Michael and Sarah, a gentle but firm expression on his face. "And to those who may have underestimated me, I hope this clarifies any misconceptions." The message was unmistakable. The rest of the wedding ceremony passed in a blur. Michael and Sarah remained silent, their faces a mixture of mortification and dawning realization. They approached us at the reception, not with an apology, but with a desperate attempt to salvage their image. "Arthur, we had no idea," Michael stammered, his usual confidence completely gone. We just thought you were a quiet, retired professor." Sarah, ever the pragmatist, immediately switched tactics. "Darling, we are so incredibly proud of you. You're an inspiration," she gushed, forcing a smile. I just looked at them, my heart still heavy with their earlier cruelty. Arthur, with a polite but distant smile, simply said, "Thank you for your kind words. Now if you'll excuse us, we have guests to greet." He subtly steered me away, leaving them standing there, bewildered and exposed. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Michael and Sarah spent the rest of the evening trying to ingratiate themselves with Arthur, fawning over him, making exaggerated compliments, and even trying to introduce him to their important friends. Arthur, however, remained courteous but kept his distance, his interactions brief and formal. He treated them exactly as they had treated him, politely, but without warmth. It was a subtle, elegant form of revenge, delivered with grace and dignity. They tried to apologize to me later, claiming they were just concerned for my welfare. But their words rang hollow. Their true intentions had been laid bare for everyone to see. In the following weeks and months, their attempts to reconnect with Arthur, to somehow benefit from his newfound public status, were relentless. They invited him to dinners, sent him expensive gifts, and even tried to involve him in their business ventures. Arthur, however, politely declined every invitation, always with a vague excuse. He had no interest in people who only valued him for his money or status. He valued kindness, respect, and genuine connection, qualities they had so clearly lacked. Our relationship with Michael and Sarah never fully recovered. I still love my son, of course, and I cherish my grandchildren, but a deep rift was formed that day, a scar that remains. I now see Michael and Sarah through a different lens, a clearer lens. I see their ambition, their superficiality, and their willingness to judge and dismiss others based on their perceived status. Arthur and I, on the other hand, are happier than I ever thought possible. We travel, we pursue our passions, and we live a life filled with love, respect, and genuine connection. We surround ourselves with people who appreciate us for who we are, not what we have. So, that's my story. It was a day of profound heartbreak, but also a day of unexpected revelation and ultimate vindication. It taught me that true worth isn't measured by wealth or status, but by character, kindness, and integrity. And sometimes the old man has a few surprises up his sleeve. Like this video, if you were on my side, if you think I made the right choice by letting the truth speak for itself. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did Michael and Sarah get what they deserved? Would you have done the same? I'll see you all in the next story.